In my first Horus Heresy video, I briefly mentioned how neither me nor my opponent used a rite of war in order to keep the match balanced. This was mainly because of me, as I was playing with what I had rather than with what I would want. Wishing to change that, a quick look at the generic rites of war revealed that my legion was a single dedicated transport away from qualifying as an armored spearhead. Now I could just buy a single rhino and call it a day. Or, as you can guess from the title and thumbnail, I could go for a land raider instead. Look at it. It's so stubby looking. It's built as the Proteus carrier due to that version being the one needed for the rite of war. I also didn't film the building process as it's pretty straightforward. There is little variation in how you can build it, unless you go for the Explorator variant. And, well, I also forgot to film it. The plan is to paint the interior as well, though with the whole thing glued together, I might have just screwed myself and made it harder for no reason. Well, it's not going to get painted by just looking at it, so let's get to it. First things first, I may as well get the hardest piece to paint out of the way now. Looking at the image Games Workshop has on their page, it seems like they apply a thin dose of a brown yellowish paint on the floor, and a dark paint on certain edges to give it a chipping effect. Now, I don't think I have the skills necessary to recreate that finished paint job one-to-one, but I'm not one to shy away from taking a crack at it. Before applying the main colors I mentioned, let's paint the griddle here a neutral gray, and give some life to the Vox on the side of the main hatch here by using an oily steel metallic color and some vibrant colors for the buttons and screens on it. Not red though. This is due to the fact that most of the tank will be painted that color, being for my blood angels and all. One coat of the new Nuln oil and that console is looking decent for something that will rarely be seen much. It's for my own satisfaction. With that done, let's apply a thinned down solution of Agrax Earthshade all over the floor and a bit on the pieces of the walls that are close to said floor. This is to simulate dirt and grime that is brought on by the infantry assigned to this vehicle. Though, while that dries, can I just say that I adore the First World War aesthetic that the Land Raider evokes? Love the landship vibe, though I can't say the same for the turreted vehicles. Leave a comment down below on which kind of design you, personally, prefer. Alright, it looks like the paint has dried. Time for some German gray applied to the edges that would see use, if this thing were, theoretically, real. Some on the floor, some on the walls, none on the roof though. A little apothecary white contrast to add some shading to the rear door wouldn't hurt. It won't be seen at all while it's on the table, but it'll look nice here. Okay. Well, it could look worse, I guess. In hindsight, I should have just left it white and used the contrast paint to add shading. The chipping looks great on the walls, and would have been enough on the floor, to be completely honest. Now I'm kind of glad that the doors will stay shut for the majority of my games. With the interior done, we can now move on to the biggest part, painting the hull. You didn't think I was going to paint it with a brush, did you? No, for this one I'll be using an airbrush, and contrast Blood Angels red. There is only one small problem. Contrast paint is too thin for black primer. So I'll just do something I once saw one of my friends do. Dry brush a lighter color, and then use the contrast paint. I could use neutral gray again, but if the contrast paint ends up too dark, it could get confused for word bearers. So for the dry brush base coating, I'll use a lighter gray. Maybe sky gray will do the trick. With that done, we can then move on to busting out the airbrush. Using one, whether your own or borrowing one from a buddy, works wonders for getting vehicles looking good and in record time. I won't be using any fancy techniques, as I'm still a novice with it, just painting the main hull contrast Blood Angels red. After that, we'll get it varnished in order to protect the paint job we just did. Or rather, not let it get stripped away when handling it. Looking at it like this, it feels like it needs something more in order to be visually striking. I was thinking about black marks on the rear, similar to what the ones on the main page have. Yeah, that looks nice. I'll use the same color for the engine block as well. We now move on to metallics. And while non-metallic metal seems to be all the rage these days, I don't trust my skills enough to pull that off just yet. Maybe next time. So, Gehenna's Gold for the Aquilus, Sun Skull on the front and Blood Angel icon, Rune Lord Brass for the las cannon coils and exhaust cowlings. Last, but certainly not least, Oily Steel for the las cannons, exhaust itself, and every single last bonding stud. After finishing that up, I'll bring the tank inside to the dining table, because even though sunlight is the best kind of lighting you could have, being hunched over is going to kill my back. When it comes to the edge highlighting step of the process, I try to use good old classic dark red, as with the rest of my Blood Angel vehicles. But it just blends in here. I'll have to figure out what to do about this later. For now, neutral gray on black. That always works. While I figure out what to do with the red highlight, I'll paint the las cannon cables. Now for these, I don't want a metallic color. Red would blend in too much with the armor, and black would seem too bland. So, I have an idea. Maybe not a unique one, but definitely a striking one. White first as a base coat to counteract the black primer. Once it's dry, Eandon yellow contrast. The paint will pool in the recesses, but not the raised areas, giving nice definition to the cables themselves. And no hazard stripes this time. It would just be too time-consuming. While we let that dry, I figured that now would be a good moment to add shading to the metallic colors. I'll keep it simple, as this is just to add shading. Agrax Earth Shade for brass, gold, and the folds in the banner of the front. Nuln Oil for the steel. Once all of it dries, a nice coat of warp lightning contrast on lenses to better identify them. Technically, you could leave them be, or even paint them black, but it's such a small and simple step that I feel it's worth it to bring the attention to a specific part or have an interesting detail. The tracks are the easiest. Dry brush of gunmetal all over them will get it done. Ideally, some dry paint down the middle would really seal the deal, maybe some kind of sandy color, but my inability to acquire one will see them stay as is, for now at least. Almost last, and certainly not least, we will apply everything we just used to the tank commander. The only exception will be using off-white on the visor before coating it with warp lightning contrast. And no shoulders on this guy, otherwise he would be too large to get inside when the battle begins. Now, I'm inclined to say that I'm done with it, as the dry brushing on the hull and subsequent airbrush with contrast paint created some subtle highlights on the tank. But it just doesn't satisfy me. It looks too flat as it is. So after looking through my paints, I settled on using orange-red as the highlight color. Once that is all done, I still feel like I could add something to it. So battle damage and chipping it is. The trick here will be to use pure black paint, and depending on where I apply it, I'll have to add the respective highlight color beneath it to show light reflecting off of the hole, or damage. Once that dries, let's go outside and see how it ended up. Whoa, I'm amazed at how good the battle damage looks. This is the first time I've done it and was very easy to make. Might go back at some point and do it with the other 3 vehicles. Speaking of those rhinos and predator, they definitely look like word bearers when compared to the brighter tone of the Land Raider. I'll just hope I never face that legion when playing games so as to avoid confusion. The bottom of the assault ramp maybe could have done with a lot less shading and more chipping instead, as I mentioned earlier. But it looks nice enough from a distance, where it will be seen for most of the time anyways. Next time though, I'm going to have to try my hand at painting non-metallic metal, as it could look great with some of the pieces that would require it. Also, I received this comment on my Bayard's Revenge video. You may want to try using a much better primer, like Stynylrez, for much smoother and less grainy/sandy effect. It's a game changer for sure. After pondering the comment and filming this video, I realized something. The grainy effect isn't because of the primer, it's mainly because of my camera. Most of the shots are zoomed in slightly in order to give me space to both see what I am doing and have ample space to maneuver the brush. In reality, the primer leaves a much smoother surface than what you might see here. Though, if you want to see what the Land Raider Proteus, and other miniatures for that matter, look like in higher detail, come check out my Instagram page. But for now, that is all I have. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you have any recommendations on how to improve next time, leave a comment down below. In any way, shape, or form, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.